Hey, this is Frank. You're listening to an Origins episode of the Unbecoming Platypus podcast. Do you ever feel like you have friends who sometimes just don't get each other? This is a podcast that I recorded with two of my friends, Jake and Noah. We find out the hard ways we struggle to communicate better and sometimes succeed, but sometimes not. For years, the three of us have talked about communication and how it's sometimes easier said than done. Even when we're trying to be understanding, our well-meaning intentions often get lost in translation. We decided to share these conversations with the world. Join us as we find out what happens when three friends try to learn how to really talk to each other. We're recording a podcast.
Cool.
This coffee doesn't taste moldy to me.
It tastes less moldy this month, this
I'm getting
day.
a lot of caramels and vanillas.
Has moldy coffee been a problem recently?
Does this one taste moldy to you?
It's the same coffee. I don't see any reason.
Please try it and tell me, because it'll encourage me to go get another cup if
It's the ice?
Yeah.
What if it's the ice?
Yeah.
I thought it was the tube. Try it, though.
Damn it.
What?
I got a nice chunk of the ice just to...
What about the flavors?
That tastes like cold.
Water.
No, just cold. It tastes like the flavor cold. I didn't really get much flavor, which I had just drank the same thing. So may have canceled out.
I see.
But there wasn't a heightened sense of mold.
If you were to drink...
But there was a heightened sense of cold.
Yep, because of the ice, I think.
If you were to drink a Venezuelan beer in Curacao, would you put it over ice?
I'd never do any of this.
Some things here today are suggesting that maybe you would.
I thought that beer was Amsterdamish.
I think you should drink iced coffee over ice.
Oh, the one he put over ice was, I
was
would
a
take it
Dutch
back.
beer.
It wasn't a Venezuelan beer. He wouldn't put Venezuelan beer.
He liked that just fine. They don't have hops in Venezuela.
Is that true?
I don't know. Hops are
Seems impossible
prolific.
to
They
be
grow anywhere.
anywhere.
Come on, man. Let's not go there.
I just don't think that there is a large market outside of certain countries for craft beer.
Yeah.
There's not much market in Latin America for craft beer, from what I understand, talking to like Alejandro and stuff. So I don't think they do that sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean, at one time there wasn't a market for many of the things that exist here. I think it takes...
Boredom. Just absolute cultural boredom.
Yeah, probably boredom, and you have to have a certain...
Hipster amount.
Level of
Like
depression.
level of hipster.
I was going to go with this word that starts with A that I can't think of.
Are those the same thing? Depression?
Hipster
Depression and
amount,
hipster.
societal depression.
Yeah.
I have no idea.
Yeah, I think innovation is either the child of necessity or luxury.
Based on Jake's attire, he should be able to tell us.
He
I just told you.
He does look both depressed and hipster. It's true.
I'm just sleepy, man. I need to drink more coffee.
What do you think do not disturb means in the context of that alert sound I just got?
Did it ding to let you know that it's on do not disturb mode?
It just dinged.
I'll tell you something interesting is last night I had my phone on Do Not Disturb and it vibrated like 3 times. There were no notifications when I looked at my phone, but it vibrated.
Apple, if you're listening to this.
There's a thing Apple does.
It sucks.
It does suck at notifications. There's no way around it. They make it so that you can set your notifications to do things that don't tell you about them. And there's no like log of notifications to go view what happened. So you can get your phone in a state where an app is set to vibrate without telling you anything else.
I have no idea what vibrated.
Right.
And I put my phone on Do Not Disturb a lot. I don't ever have, this is the first time I've ever had this problem where it vibrated on Do Not Disturb. And then when I went and looked at it, because I heard it vibrate like 3 times, I went and looked at it. No idea why it vibrated.
Yeah. You have sounds on for that app and no badges and no visual notifications.
I don't have sounds on for anything that I know of.
Right. But when you're on Do Not Disturb, you have it set to vibrate. And you may have one exception in your apps or something. It's possible. It's terrible. If there's a bad thing they do, notifications.
Yeah, and Apple Wallet.
I love Apple Wallet.
It's terrible.
It's a 10 out of 10.
Apple, we need to talk.
This podcast is not sponsored by Apple.
They're waiting for you to get to a 7 out of 10 so that they can bring you up.
If we are ever sponsored by Apple, we either did something very right or very wrong. I don't know.
No, only right, I think.
I don't think Apple sponsors things.
They don't.
You can
They
get
don't
all your
sponsor
Platicast
podcasts.
products through Apple Store.
We're here to let all the people know about Apple that don't know about Apple.
And
This
Target.
Would you
this is like,
recommend
why
Apple
would
to
I
your
recommend
friends?
Target to my friends? Everyone knows about Target. I don't need to recommend you.
So during this week, at some point, I did think about the fact that you have recommended Target to me before.
In what context?
Cauliflower rice and Too Good yogurt.
I think I recommended prices more than I recommended Target.
You were like, I go to Target for this. It's the best price. You
I
should
don't
go to
actually
Target.
buy Too Good yogurt. I buy Faye.
That is true, I'm sure. But that doesn't mean you never recommended it to me.
Regardless of recommending Target, you did recommend Too Good yogurt. That's a product that you recommended.
Yeah.
I don't know if that recommendation came from me.
What?
I heard about that brand of
I
yogurt
don't
from
care where the recommendation
Frank.
originated. I don't need a chain of custody for your recommendation.
You recommended it to me.
Okay, this is going
There's
well.
no way that's true because I ate it in Delaware.
Yep.
I need a pure provenance for this.
But you did
recommendation.
recommend the pricing at Target for Too Good yogurt to me.
Compared to Schnucks, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
You guys know the difference between provenance and provenience?
We're about to.
Yeah, go ahead and look it up.
I was doing something different right now, but I forgot what
Not
it
as
was.
important, obviously. Provenience relates to the
Provenience.
original location that something began, and provenance is the actual chain of change over time and all the locations where something has been.
Province?
Provenance. Not Providence, provenance.
All right. Well,
I-
since I'm here,
I'm looking at provenience,
Yeah,
and it says another term for provenance.
that's wrong.
It literally
I know.
says it.
See, that's the misconception. It's wrong.
province is a principal administrative division of certain countries or empires.
Okay, and what's providence?
I'm sorry, but the definition says another term for provenance. It doesn't even give it its own definition.
You don't have to apologize. I'm saying what you're reading is wrong. Providence, city in Rhode Island.
All right. God conceived as the power sustaining and guiding human destiny.
B, city in Rhode Island.
Well, the use of the term really spiked around 1979.
Providence.
Provenience.
Okay.
And then just straight downhill. Like they used it for a year.
Wow.
Divine guidance or care. The quality or state of being provident. A city in Rhode Island. A nearby local church.
Okay. Provenience, meaning the actual place or fine spot of an object. Provenance refers to its modern post-excavation history.
Wait, provenance?
I asked you for Providence because
Okay.
I thought it was fun. We went province, providence, provenance, provenience. In geology, provenance refers to where the materials that comprise a sample originated, whereas provenience simply refers to where the sample was collected. It's interesting.
Yeah, I asked an AI.
The difference?
Yeah, it said the words providence, province, provenience,
Provenience, yeah.
and provenance have distinct meanings. Here's a brief explanation of each.
Nice.
Providence refers to the protective power of God or nature. Province It can mean a territorial division within a country or state. Provenience. The term is less common, is often used in the context of archaeology and art history. The origin or earliest known history of something. Provenance. Similar to provenience, provenance also refers to the origin of something or the earliest known history of something. It can also mean the record or chain of custody.
That's sort of what started this whole thing. I needed the provenance of this recommendation.
This recommendation's provenance was well documented, increasing its value. That's using it in a sentence.
So it originated. Its original find spot was in Delaware with Frank. It migrated to Noah, and then Noah disseminated it to the world.
Right. Because of his love for Too Good yogurt.
Yeah, he was the primary Too Good ambassador for a while.
I agree.
100%.
I remember a time that you were talking about all the moldy Too Good you threw away.
That happened. That's true. Me and half the internet did that. You don't add vanilla specks without saying anything about it.
Now with new specs.
Yeah.
This tells you how long I haven't been using it. I never had that problem.
You're going to find spots in your yogurt today. It's on purpose.
It's there. Yeah.
Yeah.
They're there.
Oh, I know. Because you told me, Jake, this is so moldy. I went, that's vanilla yogurt. Are you sure that isn't vanilla bean crumbs? And you were like,
No
way. Let me look this up.
No one changes their recipe in a visually obvious way without mentioning it on the container.
Yeah.
Except Too Good. They do.
Now with vanilla beans. That's all you really have to do.
From Madagascar?
Yeah. Now with natural vanilla. You can say anything, and people will be like, oh.
Something changed.
Does it make it look gross?
Oh, it's on purpose.
Yeah.
Got it. I don't think there's any mold in this mold brew.
I was waiting for the transition.
Oh, I just feel like we should have some compassion for Too Good. They're doing their best.
It's a fine yogurt. It's higher carb than I wish it was. I don't eat it that much anymore.
What differentiates Too Good yogurt from other yogurts? I never really knew.
The carbs.
So it has fewer carbs than every other yogurt, but it's still too many?
What's too many? If you really like yogurt,
I don't know. You just said
it doesn't have too many.
You wish there were fewer carbs.
It has too many for me. Yeah. I don't really like yogurt, and it doesn't have there are better foods.
It's way too sweet.
Yeah, I always mixed it half and half with plain. But
it's like erythritol or something, right?
Stevia.
Stevia? Okay.
No, I thought it had erythritol.
What?
Yeah.
I know when I tried it, it had this artificial sweetener flavor that I could not get behind.
It's very sweet.
That's what always kept me away from it.
It's sweet. I always split it. Too Good yogurt does not contain erythritol. It has 2 grams of total sugar, 0 grams of added sugar. It's derived from the stevia leaf.
Oh, interesting. I thought it was erythritol.
Ingredients include cultured grade A, ultra-filtered non-fat milk, cultured grade A, reduced fat milk, water, natural flavors, active yogurt cultures, and stevia, but no erythritol.
Nice.
I think it's stevia.
Stevia. It is in Spanish.
Where does the stevia plant originate? I need its provenience.
Stevia is pronounced Stevia, according to pronouncenames.com and the Cambridge English Dictionary.
What do they know?
Stevia.
Wow. Good. The Oxford English Dictionary actually has a fantastic origin story.
What do you guys think of stevia?
We are looking at how to pronounce the name of this plant that produces a sugar substitute. We'll be looking at how to say more names like this one. Many get confused by food names as well. Names of chemical compounds and beyond. So let's break down the pronunciation.
I would listen to this man read a book. I would love that.
Stevia is how it's pronounced. So you have a st sound, a v sound, and an a sound or a sound. Stress on the first syllable, 3 syllables overall. Stress on the Stevia. It's easy. Stevia. And now you know.
There you go. That's from How to Pronounce Stevia.
Yeah, but is that the plant or is that the brand?
There's no brand.
There is no brand? Okay.
I'm afraid that the Tuppies probably couldn't hear that.
It's okay.
All right. What's the topic? The role of self-compassion.
Yeah.
How do you want to introduce that topic, Jake?
What do you think about self-compassion?
Today we're talking about self-compassion. What do you guys think about self-compassion?
I like it.
What we did recently is we created a list of topics.
So we got one in the bank now, right?
It's already published,
It's published.
bro.
No, I'm talking about, we asked, what do you think about it?
Oh, yeah, that one's done.
He said, I like it. We're out.
Yeah.
Let's move on to the next one.
Oh, right. I forgot about that. That's a great idea.
It's a great idea to do for inanimate objects. What do you think about table?
Depends on the table.
Yeah, I was going to say which table.
This one.
I don't like this table.
Yeah, I don't. I also.
I love this table.
Really?
I would have epoxied that hole, but
I think that hole might exist for cables
I know. But why wouldn't you epoxy most of it?
because that would look weird.
No, it wouldn't.
The whole point
They
is the
epoxied
live
this right here.
live edge.
You either fully epoxy or you don't epoxy.
But they didn't. That's not what they did here.
They did a partial epoxy.
What is that?
You know
Triple
what that is.
filtered or what?
I'm looking at the epoxy.
Partial epoxy.
Yeah, I mean, there's some epoxy and there's some
No epoxy.
no epoxy.
We recently compiled a list of potential topics that seemed like they'd be great to talk about.
We sure did.
And then independently, we ranked them according to our interest in them. And what the Tuppies are getting right now is that last week's episode was the number one highest ranked topic of any ever.
Was
according
it?
to us three.
Was that pre-ranking?
I thought that was
Yeah.
it was an accident.
I don't think that was ranked.
That was ranked. We went to Docs and talked about it.
What was it?
Exactly. It was embracing uncertainty.
Oh, yeah. That's what we called it.
No, that was the topic on.
Yeah, that's what we called it until we edited it and published it because it was nothing like that.
Right. This is a point. I want the entire listener base to understand that this is the number 2 highest ranked topic according to Frank, Jake, and Noah, and it's coming at you hot.
It's the seed of...
That's right.
Yeah.
Which is a beautiful thing. You can never be certain where a conversation is going, can you?
No.
It's so uncertain.
Yeah, so the summary of this podcast you're about to listen to is explore the concept of self-compassion, its importance in self-care and resilience. Share strategies for practicing self-compassion in daily life. Now let's see how we do.
Yeah, that's great. Noah, go ahead.
Do you want to start with...
My favorite part of this topic is that when we discussed it in our pre-pod meeting on Tuesday, all of us were very surprised that we all ranked it.
Well, I think the primary product of Tuesday's conversation was 2 out of 3 of us don't believe that self-compassion is a thing. It's certainly not a known term.
Well, I think all of us or most of us were confused by the topic when we ranked it.
So here's what I think we should do. I find that when I re-listen to some of our episodes, it takes us about 20 minutes of talking about 2 or 3 different definitions of a word to realize that's what we're doing. And then we have to come back and say, oh, let's talk about that thing. So here's what I'd love to know.
Rename our podcast Defined
Yeah.
and do something different than what we've been doing.
But here's what I really mean when I say, what do you think of self-compassion? It's like, when you hear the term self-compassion, Frank, what does that evoke in your mind? What sorts of ideas?
I would like to answer that, but I would first like to take a detour completely. So can you remember the question so we can come back to it later?
Is the detour... This has been an Origins episode. Yeah, we could absolutely come back.
No, that's not the detour. What was the detour, though? Oh.
Can you remember the detour?
We believe there's beauty in learning.
Yeah, and all kinds of other stuff, too. So I think self-compassion is something we all value and do, but I think talking about it doesn't sound as good as trying to practice it.
So you want to talk about practicing self-compassion?
No, I'm saying there might be some trepidation to talk about it versus the idea of it being what our podcast is about. Oh, how do I practice it in my daily life? That seems a little more icky than that's a good topic everyone should know about.
Oh, yeah. Maybe it's because we don't practice it as often as we should.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
We tend to be harder on ourselves than we are on other people, typically.
Yeah. Do you agree?
No, this makes no sense to me, but I love it. Like,
so you want to talk about self-compassion?
yeah, I think it's
I
great.
thought I was the one that didn't care about other people. I don't have compassion on others at all.
I'm all about this one.
I don't know. It's blank. Like, I can't relate to what you're talking about right now. It doesn't feel icky. There's no strangeness. There's no confusion.
I think I understand what you're saying. I agree. It doesn't feel that icky to me. I think it does. I hate that I just said icky. You both said icky, and so I said it.
Yeah.
And now I've said it 3 times.
I really like to use the word icky. I started because I'm a parent, and I think I've indoctrinated you guys.
It's really icky to use it.
Yeah.
But anyway, I think the average person does not like talking about self-care topics publicly because, well, I think for lots of reasons, but I think a lot of people do a poor job of self-care.
It's a vulnerable area.
It feels very exposed to talk about it. Even if you do things to take care of yourself, sometimes talking about the things that you do seems very vulnerable.
Okay.
So I think that's where he's coming from, not necessarily that the topic itself is icky.
I gotcha.
Definitely that. Yeah. I voted for it to be high. I want to talk about it. There does feel like there's trepidation when it comes to the actual talk about your own practices and self-compassion.
I think us 3 maybe feel less vulnerable in talking about it than most people, but I think he's talking about the general public. Yeah.
I've said before, like, the more work that I do on myself, the more that I project that progress or healing or whatever it is onto the world around me. And that really is the difficulty, is just remembering, like, not everybody is in that place.
All right. Pre-detour, what was your question?
I'd love to get some sort of working definition or understanding of what we all think of when we think of self-compassion.
Can I go last?
Are you looking up a definition? Because I'm really looking for what comes up in your mind when you hear this term. And in that way, I feel like maybe it's best for you to go first.
Hang on, and I'll go first.
Okay.
You don't think we should use a definition that's real?
I think we could do both.
Yeah.
But I think that everybody has a different idea of what self-compassion means.
Is there a difference here between self-compassion and self-care?
Well, I would love to hear that. What do you, Noah, what do you think of when you think of self-compassion? Maybe it's close to self-care.
I think they're similar concepts in theory. Obviously, the words mean different things, compassion and care. Mm-hmm. But I think when you're talking about caring for yourself, I think they're very similar. I think you have to have compassion for yourself to care for yourself. Mm-hmm. And maybe you need to care for yourself to have compassion on yourself as well.
Yeah, I think they're the opposite order of what you first said, but I think self-care comes from having self-compassion. Or, yeah, that's what I think.
Yeah, that's what I said originally.
Okay.
Yeah. While I do think they're different things, I think they do go hand in hand when you're talking about yourself. And maybe in other contexts as well. But yeah, I think of taking care of myself, giving myself what I need as far as relaxation, recovery. I think when I think of compassion specifically, I think of going easy on myself when I've made an error or when I've done something that I didn't like, or if I'm feeling overwhelmed or whatever, having compassion, understanding that I have a lot to deal with, that I have responsibilities, that life isn't easy.
Yes.
These things.
So that's what I think of when I think of self-compassion. It's very almost synonymous with this idea of like forgiveness and empathy. Like the more that I just observe this Jake and all of the environmental variables and all of the expressions and everything that's going on, and just saying, hey man, you made a mistake and that's okay.
Yeah.
We're going to learn and we're going to move on.
I don't think it has to be specific to making a mistake.
I agree.
Though. I think it can just be realizing that you need rest, that that you do a lot of things, that you take care of a lot of things, that you have lots of responsibilities, that you need to rest and recover, and that it's okay to give yourself whatever it might be that you need. One of the things I do for myself, I take a lot of Epsom baths, and there's multiple reasons for that. It is, number one, I'm in a relationship, but it's a long distance relationship. I don't get a lot of human touch, and research shows that you release more oxytocin in a warm bath because it sort of mimics touch in a way, like you're surrounded by warmth. So that's something that I need that I don't get regularly because I'm not. If Amy was here, we would hug and cuddle and stuff, and I would have even just hold hands, any human touch, but I don't get a lot of human touch. So trying to give myself that. Epsom baths help with electrolyte replenishment. They just help with overall relaxation. I tend to meditate while I'm in there. So it gives me I turn my phone on, do not disturb. There's nothing unless it vibrates.
Vibrating. Yeah.
There's nothing that can bother me. I will just have a time of meditation and relaxation. And these things are important too. That is an acknowledgement that I have stress in my life, that I'm dealing with work and relationship and whatever else is happening in my life, and that I can and deserve to have a moment where I step away and shut down.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, it's just this acknowledging, like, because it is so much easier to extend compassion to everyone around you, in my experience anyway. Hey, you've been burning the candle at both ends. You need to take it easy. It's all right. But it's so difficult. There seems to be this almost implicit belief, but I'm Superman, but I can handle it all, but I can go forever without needing anything.
Yeah, I didn't feel comfortable saying a definition because the one that was coming to mind I knew was lacking elements. That's what was happening, why I looked it up.
So is what we're saying, does that align with the definition that you found?
Yeah, pretty much. This isn't a definition, by the way. It's an aggregation of a lot of available information through large language models. It's more like a working, real definition from a lot of data. It's not like what you find in Merriam-Webster.
Well, yeah, understood.
What?
There is a school of thought when it comes to what the job of a lexicographer is that questions whether a definition should be prescriptive or descriptive. And you're actually drawing that distinction right now. It is not the intention of the dictionary to prescribe how a word should be used, but rather the reason that those definitions are updated every 10 to 20 years is because the way that that word is used changes in popular culture. So it's intended to describe the way it's used, which is exactly what you're saying here.
So you're saying that we should update it?
I'm saying that what you're about to share is realistically the intention behind what the dictionary is. Though most people believe the dictionary is supposed to be prescriptive, it's actually trying to be descriptive. The format of a book makes it difficult to do that. The internet makes it a lot easier.
Yeah. This makes reference to like 5 other pages. It combined the information, but it does track with what I think of, which the most obvious example of is how I handle carbohydrates.
Mm-hmm.
I don't eat them usually. They're not a huge part of my diet anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But if I'm stressed or things aren't going well in another area and I really want to, I do, because it's okay.
Mm-hmm.
And it's especially okay if it's rare.
I really liked the post you did last night, and it talked about here's how I accomplished my goals. And one of them was like, eat foods that are off plan sometimes, but make it rare.
Yeah.
I thought that was this really great self-compassion, acknowledging reality.
Definitely.
Piece.
Yeah. And acknowledging reality and like the humanness of everything is a big part of it. But I'll read the actual thing that's from smarter people than me now. Self-compassion, as defined in psychology, is the act of extending compassion to oneself in times of perceived inadequacy, failure, or general suffering. It's composed of 3 main elements: self-kindness, common humanity, and mindfulness. Self-compassion involves being warm and understanding towards oneself, recognizing that suffering and personal failure are part of the shared human experience, and taking a balanced approach to negative emotions. It is different from self-pity and is associated with greater psychological health, including life satisfaction, happiness, and emotional resilience. In essence, self-compassion means being kind and understanding to oneself when confronted with personal failings, rather than being self-critical or judgmental.
Yeah.
That's what I was going to say, but some parts of it weren't there, so I had to look it up.
Yeah. It's interesting. I feel like it really hit most of the points that we got at. I started by saying, well, yeah, if you make a mistake, tell yourself it's okay. And then Noah said, it's not just that. I think it's interesting to note, though, that it talks about personal failings. And I think that when we try to burn that candle at both ends, it's a perceived personal failing because there is some sort of implicit belief that I should be able to just go forever and that be sustainable.
Yeah.
That's why it falls into that class.
Think of that distinction between forgiveness and mercy that you were talking about. Pete Holmes mentioned, I think it was from the guy from Homeboy Industries. Father Greg Boyle. Was that his name?
I think so. Peter Boyle?
Is it Peter Boyle?
Maybe.
It doesn't matter. Homeboy Industries. Anyway, but this distinction between forgiving someone or having mercy on someone, mm-hmm. and mercy being acknowledgement that we are all broken, essentially, that we're all the same. And I think this works in this self-compassion context as well. Instead of forgiving yourself, you're saying, I am just human.
Definitely.
You're having mercy on yourself. You're saying you are going to make mistakes. It's okay to make mistakes. Everyone makes mistakes. Or it doesn't have to be about mistakes. You're tired. You're a human being. Everybody gets tired. Everyone's exhausted. Everyone gets worn out. Everyone gets overwhelmed. It's this sort of self-mercy aspect in all things rather than just the forgiveness.
Yeah, for me, it's definitely not forgiveness. I don't know why, but I have a specific neural pathway that forgiveness is at the end of, and before it is shame. And this doesn't, it's not in there. When I'm being self-compassionate, I don't feel shame. I don't feel a need for forgiveness. I did feel inadequate maybe in some way, or I'm suffering, or I failed. But a part of this is that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
That it doesn't need special forgiveness, that it doesn't need a shame cycle.
One of the things that's really interesting, super interesting, I love that. One of the things that came out of some personal journaling I was doing when I was in the cabin was almost what you're talking about. It was like this distinction between a retroactive sort of forgiveness. I think that forgiveness has this innate quality of retroactivity. Something happened and we're atoning, or we're making it right later on.
Yeah, I think of it in relationship where there is another ego involved that does feel like you did something wrong.
Sure.
You know, if I say, hey, that wasn't okay, then you say, will you forgive me? And I say, yes, then we restore our relationship. But it doesn't feel like it belongs in.
It's interesting that you mentioned shame. I've heard Brené Brown talk about this in the work that her company does. One of the things they draw this distinction for the people that they work with between shame and guilt. Shame being I am bad, guilt being I did something bad.
Yeah.
And those things get melded together for many people because they're told from a young age that they are bad, or they're hearing I am bad when you're told you did something bad. Definitely. And so these things get melded together, especially in religious context. We've had that conversation before, but it doesn't have to be. Just anything that, for instance, your parents tell you did wrong, if you hear it as you are bad as opposed to you did something bad, and you learn this over many years.
Right.
Now, as an adult, when you make an error, it is way heavier than just, oh, I made a mistake.
Yeah, it's an identity crisis. It is so deeply associated with who you believe yourself to be. But that's where I was going with this idea of forgiveness. It doesn't matter what something is in and of itself. It matters the way that we perceive it, right? Shame and guilt are two different things based on how you're perceiving the same behavior. And where forgiveness feels like this retroactive thing, grace probably more than mercy is what I was dealing with in this journal entry.
Grace is the word I meant, right? Not mercy.
Yeah. And
I think I meant grace.
It's an interesting thing. And I'm again drawing this attention toward the way that we perceive it, because mercy again feels retroactive. And when I think of grace, I think of it in terms of like this mountain that is whatever shape it is. And some of the rocks are going to fall off at times, and more uplifting is going to change it. And it creates this sort of impression against the backdrop that is dark, and the light is behind it. And as soon as, at the exact same moment that a boulder falls down and that shape of the silhouette changes, the light is already its equal and opposite inverse. And it's like everything is already atoned for. Everything is already what it needs to be. And if we think in terms of like, how do I show self-compassion? It's to say, hey, what you did wasn't even wrong. It doesn't even need forgiveness. It's just what is. It's already okay.
Yeah.
And that's why I loved what you said. It's like, it doesn't need forgiveness. There is no need for shame. It's just okay. So maybe that's a way that I show myself compassion, is to say, you're okay just the way you are.
For sure. Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, it's not that like eating off plan is good. Mm-hmm. It's not the best, but it is okay.
Yeah.
It's not a thing that you should feel shame about.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think, but
yeah, it's this weird thing. I've noticed this thing in the cultures that I participate in, gym culture being one of them, a CrossFit gym. And certain things like, oh, you really need to exercise this many times per week. Oh, you really need to eat these foods and not eat these foods. Oh, you really should do all this. This word should keeps coming in. And it's like, okay, if performance is the metric by which I judge all success, then you're exactly right. I should do all those things, and if I don't, I'm failing to meet that metric optimally.
Yeah.
But that's a question that I can ask myself. Is this thing that I'm measuring myself against actually the marker for success?
Right. Yeah. And I mean, sometimes the things are optimal, but they're not possible.
Mm-hmm.
Like you shouldn't continue to go to your workouts if you're injured and do them anyways. That isn't optimal at all. And it's okay. It's the best even.
Yes.
Not go.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I do. I feel like all these things fall into that definition of like, okay, if the story I'm telling myself says that I'm not enough or I'm failing, what are the problems with my story? What story is realistic and actually accounts for all of reality?
For sure.
When I can resituate myself in that story, that's when I can rest. That's when I can be healthy.
Yeah, I think we should talk about how we came to having a story and caring about self-compassion on some level, because it wasn't direct for me. It really came through mindfulness, noticing other people's story, and then applying this framework to myself. It wasn't like ever a direct discovery for me.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, I mean, that was it. I was like, over the last 15 years or something, I went from I don't really care about other people's story to I do care about their story. And now I notice their suffering, and I noticed how difficult it is to be them. And then I was like, wait, is it difficult to be me too? Sure is. What should I do about that?
Yeah.
Maybe I should love myself.
I think that tracks, but I'm going to say it in a different way. I do think it's the same thing, but it's going to feel like from a completely different direction, I think.
Well, we're all different people.
Which is, for me, it was realizing that I can want things. And so that's been a big thing over the last 5, 6, 7 years for me, is like, I think for a long time I was on autopilot, which is me simply just doing the things that I think I needed to do. So I have to work a job to support myself. I have to pay bills. I have to whatever. And there was a moment where I was like, oh, I can actually want to go do what I want to do.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not always easy, but for me, there was a massive distinction. And I'm much happier thinking about the things that I want and chasing the things that I want than feeling like I'm just doing what I'm supposed to do. But this also comes from seeing other people go after, wait, that person is doing something they really love to do? Or that person is doing something that they really feel passionate about, or something they want to explore, or whatever it might be. And then really turning that inward and going, how do I do that? And what do I even want? I'm still trying to figure out everything that I want, but I'm way more in tune with it now than I was 10 years ago. I couldn't have told you what I wanted 10 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah. Like I have always cared about other people. That's why I became a paramedic. But it was from a different narrative completely than it is today.
Mm-hmm.
And the original narrative, so to speak, is that you are not valuable except as a utility player.
Mm.
And so go out there and help the people who are suffering, who are valuable.
Yep.
And then I sort of noticed along the way that it doesn't matter how many 911 calls you go to. The people often get themselves in situations that are emergencies. And I'm like, what's going on with these people? And so through watching that, I'm like, oh, I sort of see that there are a lot of emergencies I can't help with because they're not inflicted by a trauma or a thing that happened today, but they've been going on for many years or whatever. And then I'm like, what's it like to be a person?
Yeah.
And then it all tracks back to how does that person take care of themselves? And then how should am I a person? Should I be more than a utility player? Oh, I am.
Yeah, I relate to that a lot.
Yeah.
for sure. Mine was not, I didn't become a paramedic to help people, but I've always felt like I'm doing things for others. I'm putting other people's needs in front of my own.
Yeah.
And so the thing for me that switched was, I can take care of myself. I don't have to take care of others to take care of myself. I can just take care of myself.
Yeah, and I'm still developing that, to be honest. I'm more self-compassionate than I've ever been in my life, but I wouldn't say it's default state yet.
Oh, for sure. I think that all these stories are very similar, and I mean, mine aligns with that as well. I think that I was in a deeply sort of deluded state about what I was accomplishing with my intentions. My intentions were pure. I wanted to love the people around me, and there was this belief that to love you had to be selfless, and that selflessness meant literally never acknowledging that you are a self that has desires, that has needs, that has struggles.
Yep.
And it really took external intervention of the person I was trying to love the most, basically telling me, what you are doing is hurting me. It feels like you're lying straight to my face when you tell me that you love me. Maybe you should look into whether or not you actually are.
Yeah.
And it really was like cracking that facade, and this very rigid structure just shattered. And it was through this vehicle of mindfulness that I started looking at myself almost as this other entity. And it's that thing that we started talking about, which was to say, I'm looking at myself and I'm seeing that I too am a person. What's really cool, though, because these stories do all align so well, and I'm sure that we're not the only ones who have them, is that when you start to show that compassion to yourself, the narrative that you've been having, whether you knew it or not, for your entire life starts to shift. And when you start to love yourself in that way, that internal narrative starts to become external. And you actually are then able to extend that compassion outward to a greater degree.
Definitely. Yep. The meaning of things underpins what you do. I have many memories of people who were having a psychotic break or who just used drugs again after years of sobriety, or all these people in the ambulance that they let something mean something that's not true. Like they lost their job, so they did coke because they thought the world would end because they lost their job.
And now they think the world will end because they did coke.
Yeah. Yeah, well, they know that their world ends because their wife said, if you do coke again, I'm taking the kids and you will not have a family anymore. And they're like, she said that, and I believe her. And it's been 12 years or whatever. I remember that guy. And I remember a lot of those type of stories. And that's sort of what made me want mindfulness so bad. I'm just like, if you just were a little more pause before your decisions, if you could just think about what it means. And so through that, it started for other people. Because again, I believed I was a utility player. I'm like, maybe I can help other people with mindfulness so they won't make these choices. And then eventually I'm like, oh yeah, I'm a person as well.
Yeah.
I could probably benefit from this as an individual also.
I've heard it described as your mind is the only thing that's always going to be with you. So you might as well befriend it, I think, is the way that you've described it a lot. I've heard Sam Harris say similar things. Yep. But I also think that there's this element of trusting yourself. There's this element of watching myself on the exterior doing impossible things and watching myself make commitments and stick to them is so very essential, because if I can't trust myself to follow through on those things, I can't trust literally anything. I will never know what the next day holds because I don't know that I can trust myself to stick to it. And that to me is like the justification for pushing myself further into mindfulness and caring, is to know that I can trust myself.
Yeah. I've brought this up on a different podcast, I'm pretty sure, but to me, this is just a self-worth conversation. we're having a self-worth conversation. But I think that's what all of these conversations are ultimately, is I hear Frank saying, I didn't think I deserved to do these things myself. I just said I didn't think I deserved to go after the things I wanted. You're saying the same thing.
I didn't think I existed.
Right.
Really, I think self-worth is very close to, if there's a purpose for us being here, I think it's to acknowledge and come into our own self-worth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. And it's the greatest adventure that a person could undertake, is to get to know themselves and what's under the surface. I said this last week. I truly believe that I think there's probably many, but if there's a person who's like, how do I even shatter that illusion? It's probably there, but where do I start? For me, the greatest question was, what is the worst thing a person can be? What is the most disgusting thing that a person can do? And like, how do you find that? I'm serious. How do you find that? You find that by saying, what frustrates me? This is a very present and close sort of reaction that you can have. And when you start to realize that, put some words to it and then find it within yourself. Is there a way that I do this? If the answer is no, figure out how you're lying to yourself.
Sure.
And like, this is just a series of questions. And as you follow this breadcrumb trail of questions, you sort of start to remove the layers of illusion. And when you finally find the thing within yourself that you hated in other people, find a way to love it and find a way to show yourself this compassion. And when you do that, that self-narrative starts to change. And then your external things start to change. And it really is this sort of alchemy that starts to occur. That was a path for me. I think there are many, but that's one of them.
Yeah. Yeah, I would just get quiet enough that you can notice what your thinking patterns are. That seems like how it was for me anyways. Just starting to notice what's happening in there. Before I was 28 years old, I probably had the thought, like, you don't deserve to be in a relationship more than 1,000,000 times. I never knew about it. I'd never noticed it once.
Right.
I don't have that thought ever now. Very rarely, if I do. I catch it pretty quick. But if you can't tell what's happening in your mind, then it's pretty hopeless to change it. Just focusing on it seems like it helps too.
Yeah, it's this sort of idea that, like, I don't know if this is even helpful. There's this question in my mind. Does the one-tusked albino elephant know that it only has one tusk and it's not the same color as the other ones? Or is it just being an elephant? And my point behind this is, like, there's no such thing as normal. There's only your experience of what it is to be a human. You wouldn't know what those things are because it's always been your experience. It's like trying to chew your own teeth or lick your own tongue. What happens when you start to look at yourself and say,
I can do both of these things.
what are you taking for granted about what it is to be you?
Yeah.
Not everybody's like this. So what's a little bit different? And why is that there?
Yeah, for sure. And I have a billion examples. I could literally go on for the rest of my life explaining the things that I have noticed and stopped doing. But one that started long ago, like in church, was I would often be there to set things up for events and then not be there for the event because I didn't believe I should be, or I thought I was a utility player or whatever. And I've helped people set up for parties, and then later they're like, hey, where were you for the party? And I was like, oh, I just thought you wanted my help setting up. And they're like, what are you talking about? Now I just stick around, you know.
That aligns closely with my experience as well. That's interesting. Noah, would you say that this episode was about self-compassion?
Yeah, I mean, I think we did all right.
Tuppies, what do you think? Did we stick to the plan?
This has been an episode of the One-Tusked Albino Elephant Podcast.
Yeah, thanks for listening, everyone.
Thanks, guys.
Hey, it's Frank again. Thanks for listening to an Origins episode of the Unbecoming Platypus podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to our podcast to stay updated on future episodes. You can also check us out online at theunbecomingplatypus.com. We hope these conversations inspire you to improve your communication skills and deepen your connections with your own friends and loved ones. Until next time, this has been the Unbecoming Platypus podcast.